Southeast Asia, human geography. We'll be taking a look at the economy in this video. Okay, let's move back real quick. Okay, good. So taking a look at the agriculture, most East Asian countries or Southeast Asian countries, the countries we'll be taking a look at, they've already made a switch from a rural agrarian economy to what we call an urban industrialized economy. China, which we think of as being this tremendous economic power, they actually have the most rural economy. 50% of the population of China works on farms. So let's put this into a little bit better context. China is the world's most populous country as far as population. What that means is that 50% of the people in the country that has the largest population in the world works on farms. And when we're talking about Southeast Asia as a whole, the level of industrialization or the level of advanced economies, more technical economies, first world economies, it varies by region. So what you'll find are areas that have really, really advanced economies, and you'll find a lot of areas, though, with really agrarian, agriculture-based economies. Now, you'll also find what is called a cottage system, and that is just a cottage industry, which is a domestic system or a specialized industry. So it's a specialized industry where people actually do the work in their homes. And we think about this in the United States. You might have babysitters, people do work in their home, or even what we see now more of in the United States with telemarketers. Instead of people going to these large telecommunications places and clocking in and out, due to the fact that we have computers and phone lines at our homes, you see a lot of industries now moving to where people would just plug into their computer and work from home. Some different examples, though, when we discuss the cottage industries or the industries that people work from at home in Southeast Asia, are textiles industry. So people are doing weaving in their homes, sewing, jewelry, wood carvings, furniture, and pottery. High-tech industry, and of course let's go back for a second, take a look at this picture. This is what you guys would see as agriculture. This picture represents the agriculture industry in South Asia. So it's, as you can tell, pretty small, looks like subsistence farming. High-tech industry, a manufacturing of equipment for the computers, communications, or aerospace industries. This is probably what you guys think about a lot when we think about Asia, especially when you think about Japan, right? High-tech devices, cell phones, and you think about Korea. That's where Samsung comes from, the number one cell phone provider, or the number one cell phone provider overall in the world. They're beating Apple, so they battle with Apple for number one and number two. So in East Asia, Japan is a leading producer of high-tech products. South Asian countries are the second largest exporter of computer software. So when we start looking at some of these countries, of course, or some of these companies that you guys may think about, Samsung is one of them. Once again, the Galaxy Notebook, all of those things, the tablets, the cell phones, the home appliances, the televisions. LG is another Korean company, Life's Good, and Honda. These are all companies that are founded and based in Southeast Asia, between Japan and Korea. And this is normally what we think about when we think about exports from, most of us, when we think about exports from Asia. And that brings us to the next concept that we'll discuss very briefly is China. You notice that I did not mention China when we discussed some of the major countries or some of the major companies, the major high-tech companies. China has kind of a checkered past when it comes to human rights violation and its human rights violations, which are the way they treat their workers, which actually this is something that's popping up in all of South Asia. But human rights violations, not just of their workers, but of their people. And we'll talk about that in a second. But initially, what I want you guys to know is that, or understand, is that China right now is this big dominant world power. And they have a mixed economy that is very similar to ours. It's similar to ours in that it's mixed, but it's more of a mixture of more of a democracy, a market economy, and you're looking at a market economy and more of a communist system. So they found a way to blend this. But they are mixed. At one point in time, they used to be communist. And this is something that's happened fairly recently within the past 7 years that China has made this switch with very good results. So Communist China made going back to the video now, discussing trade and human rights violations in China. China made the transition from a command economy to a mixed economy about 70 years ago. And they wanted to trade because they wanted to trade with the United States and other countries. What China saw is that communist countries like the USSR, Cuba themselves, North Korea were falling behind economically. To powers like Europe, other countries of Europe and the United States because of the economic model. Communism is not as inefficient as an economic model, or a command economy is not as efficient as market economy. So China changed their economy to give them the best of both worlds between a command economy and a market economy. So we're looking at China made the switch from a command economy to a blended command/market economy, okay? And they've been very successful. So one thing we want to know is that, and I want you guys to remember, is that, and this graphic represents China's, the move from China, from communism to capitalism. But how does China treat its people? Well, the government of China treats dissidents, and dissidents are people who rebel against the government or people who protest against the government. Just the things that we see here against the United States of America all the time that we take for granted, where people speak out against the government or disagree against the government. You cannot do that in China, okay? And people who do that, they're treated very, very, very harshly. Dissidents are people who speak out against government practices. An example of when people spoke out against government practices or rebelled against governments dealt with the massacre in Tiananmen Square in 1989, when a bunch of students got together, thousands of students got together. They protested the way that the government's economy, the way that they did business. They wanted reforms in the government, and they were summarily slaughtered. These pictures come from Tiananmen Square. This is actually, if you check really, you can see right here, this is a student standing in front of tanks. The tanks are rolling. So it did not end well for the student. At this particular student as well, for many of the students, China deals very harshly with people who speak out against the government. That is something. So if you think about guys like Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Keith Olbermann, all of these people, CNN, probably half the people on Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC would be in jail in China because speaking out against the government is not allowed. The second picture that you see, the second graphic, is just more of the aftermath of Tiananmen Square. And these were university students. So thousands of university students came together to protest government actions, and the government, they dealt with it very harshly, using military force, using deadly force to deal with it very harshly. As a result of Tiananmen Square and just other different trades and human rights violations in China, the United States, Japan, and other countries, as a result of these actions and other things that China has done, placed sanctions, which are trade restrictions against trade against China. They refused to do certain types of business with China as a way to motivate the Chinese government to reform and to change the ways that they deal with people who protest, and just to change the way they do business in general. So as a result of the sanctions, China released several of the dissidents from prison, several of the protesters from prison, and the United States lifted the sanctions. But many people in and outside of China are very dissatisfied with China's human rights policies. But China kind of has the world at a disadvantage because it has become one of the number one manufacturers in the world, one of the number one lenders of money in the world. So it's very hard for the rest of the world, with the United States included, to tell China what to do. It's becoming very, very hard to do that now. Please remember, highlight the homework learning targets and answer the questions in bold lettering. Have a good day. It's the end. Have a good day. See you in class.